Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, all of you. Thank you so much for joining in from whichever part of the world you have logged in. It's a great pleasure through new normal connecting with you, all of you again. And I know this is really a tough time for all of us. We are moving from one lockdown to another. We are currently in lockdown 4.0. And this is also a good time for us to reflect on what changes we need to bring in post-COVID era, whichever form it is, whichever relaxation and kind of new format that comes in, we should be ready for that. So with that, I thought it will be good to have a conversation with one of the industry veteran in skill development space, Mr. Balasubramanian. I have known Bala for a very, very long time. Bala
Hello.
and I go long back. In 1994, I still remember, Bala, when I met you in Chennai for our career counseling program organized by Government of Tamil Nadu. That's when I've heard first time about pharmacy as an option. I met with your father, and since then our friendship continues. And I know we spent 4 years in Ooty studying pharmacy together. And then we again worked together in Hyderabad in one of the first early movers in short-term vocational skilling in India, Dr. Reddy's Foundation. And it's a pleasure having you on this channel, New Normal.
Thank you very much, Bhaskar, for hosting me. It's a wonderful opportunity to be part of your conversation. I've been constantly watching some of the conversations that you've had, which has actually given a lot of insights. It's an honor to be part of this conversation. And good afternoon to all others who are joining in this conversation. As Bhaskar was mentioning, it is one of the critical time that we should be reflecting back on some of those policies that has worked, not worked, and the context that we are in, what would be most relevant, and how we should take it through. And also one disclaimer I wanted to actually put forth, which is already mentioned there, though I am currently working in National Skills Development Corporation. The findings and the references and whatever the conclusions from the recommendation that I'm going to make here, that is through the fellowship that I did last year in 2019 in Florence, in European University Institute, School of Transnational Governance. Of course, it's a year old, but when I had this conversation with Bhaskar about what could be potential discussion that we could have, he rightly pointed out to this, and also that made me think through of what those recommendations I have made, and I went back and checked on all those recommendations. I really was fascinated to understand that there's a lot of recommendations which is actually going to be contextually relevant in the current context. So I'm really excited, Bhaskar. Thanks for hosting me again.
Thanks, Bala. Thanks for the disclaimer. And same goes with me as well. I also work for a skill development organization. All views expressed here in this channel are all personal, and it is nothing attributed to any organization that we have worked so far. With that, aside, let's start the conversation, Bala. In fact, as you rightly mentioned, you went to Italy on a sabbatical with permission from your employer. And also, you have had varied exposure in the skill development space. I think you are one of the few who have got public-private partnership on either side. You have seen the policy recommendations, policy being made and implemented in close quarters. You have been in a multilateral organizations, bilateral organizations, and you have seen how countries work together in pushing a policy forward. And you have also seen the grassroots implementation in a non-profit and multitude of positions that you have held in the long 2 decades of your experience. Quite enriched by talking to you, and look forward to your findings in the recent sabbatical that you took. And in fact, as aptly we have come up with this title, a new framework recommendation for skill development policies for a resilient India post COVID-19. So it sounds very promising, and I know many of our colleagues in this skill development space have logged in, and they're all watching us. And I'm quite hopeful that many questions would come through this forum. So we have live audience from Facebook as well as from YouTube. And Bala, as we go forward, I would like to take some of these questions which are coming on the screen, and then take it forward. So to give a
Sure.
structure to our conversation, Bala, I was thinking we will
Yeah.
start with a very epic picture, and I really enjoy seeing this picture. From the time you shared it with me, this is like sea of youth, right? This is the
Yeah.
future India. And when I see all
Yeah.
of them in DDUGKY uniform, and you have held a very important portfolio as a Chief Operating Officer of DDUGKY. Can you spend a minute or two talking about your experience there? And then we'll quickly move on.
So it's quite so this picture actually gives a lot of context to both my career and the face of India and the youth and their aspirations. And all of these people are from the program called Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gramin Kaushal Yojana, which is part of Ministry of Youth Development. And this particular set of program, it's one of the PM hosted program where they were actually being facilitated with whatever they have achieved over the period of time. Meaning, some of them would have got employment, or some of them are looking for employment, hearing their stories and those kind of things. One point of confluence that happened here is Bhaskar, you're also part of the journey. You know that the first pioneering work that we did at the grassroots level in terms of understanding what actually works for school dropouts in terms of upskilling them or reskilling them to get into mainstream employment. And that exactly is the same model, not same, it's not the same model, it is the model which is adopted by the Ministry of Rural Development for the same for the same scheme. I became the COO. So it's kind of completing a circle. So therefore, to me, this picture talks a lot about both my career and also the aspirations of the youth. And that is the reason why I put here in the beginning of the presentation.
Absolutely,
And
Bala.
therefore,
And
therefore, the responsibility that I have in terms of moving forward, we have come so far, but what is the road ahead? What is the path ahead? And how we should
yeah,
take it forward is the question.
absolutely. So, from paper to a policy becoming alive and benefiting many lives, it's a huge satisfaction. And I know when we work on boxes and arrows on a PowerPoint slide, we think we are just making some policy, but when it actually comes alive, the satisfaction is tremendous. I still remember our first project that we did in Hyderabad was to study a dying municipality and a growing municipality and provide a framework. We recommended a livelihood hub concept. This was way back in 2002, Bala. Now we are
Yeah,
in 20.
yeah,
And to our surprise, we got funding, right? And the
yeah.
executive director that time, she said, "Hey guys, you guys designed it, you implement it." It was like, "Wow, my God!" Okay, so we thought it's just a college. We have graduates out of B school, and we wanted to, produce good document, good reports. But it was a pleasant surprise.
It'll be immodest to say, but I'm still saying those work is what the picture that you see actually. I mean, the millions of youth who got the benefit through that. That's the starting point. The pioneering work that happened then. Uh,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just reflecting the time machine, moving forward. When you showed me this picture and you asked me to guess the building behind, I was like, okay, this must be some IT park somewhere. Maybe you went to New York, because recently we went on a US trip as a family, and I could see many such buildings in the upmarket upstate. Even when I was working in Singapore, I could see such buildings in Corporate Park. So I couldn't really guess which building was this. And you people who are watching this on Facebook and YouTube, if you think you know which building is this, it'll be really a treat to hear from you. Please do type in on the chat window, and within a minute, I'm going to reveal which building is this. Yes, it is European Parliament. Bala, you should talk about how was your experience going to these places and studying how policy works.
So the building that I'm standing is European Commission for Economic and Social Committee. That's the building that I'm standing. I was actually, we were all taking group photos there, and one individual photo that I took here. And I was curiously asking, what are these buildings, which is behind this, thinking that it's going to be some IT park or whatever, the new age, new economy kind of sector or building. But to my surprise, they said it's the European Parliament. So we are not used to actually looking Parliament in this fashion, but that is what it is. So basically, this particular, so I was actually traveling within different parts of Europe to understand the policy, what works and what doesn't. And this particular photograph is about, interacting with the members of the European Union and also getting the reference and inferences and the evidences of what works. And there is conference that happened, which I participated. So that's the context behind this photo.
Yeah, and you also mentioned about your travel. Can you speak about the institute that you went to study the policy aspects, European University Institute, especially
Yeah,
School of Transnational Governance, that's in Florence, and then you got to
yeah.
travel all around Europe. Can you say a bit about the institute? How did you experience it?
So the program that I did is, the name of it is called Policy Leaders Fellows. They actually choose around 10 to 12 fellows every year across the globe. And I was fortunate to be representing India at that time. I was the only person from India. And of course, there's other set of people coming from different continents. And they all come together, and each one comes with different kind of skill sets, experience, background, and theme that they wanted to study. And I chose what India could learn from skills and workforce development policy. So this is a fully funded program from European Union, and it also has a component of going to different parts of the Europe to understand what works. So as part of it, I had the opportunity to visit Brussels, which I just mentioned, and Greece, and within Italy, Turin, and Venice, and few other places. And the place where I was staying there, it's Florence. It's a beautiful city where they actually provided all the facilities in terms of. So it's a focused 3-month study, just thinking about what you have done so far and what you could do for the future from the lens of policy. So that's what I did.
Yeah, perfect. So
Yeah,
let's quickly jump into the session, Bala. In fact,
yeah,
we discussed briefly about how we are going to spend this time together, and
yeah,
I think it's also good for viewers to know how we are going to spend the next few minutes. We will talk about the
yeah,
context setting, especially the skill development landscape in India, and also please do
yeah.
share your experience from other countries, how other countries are evolving and grappling with this challenge. We'll also take some time to talk about the life cycle of a skill development ecosystem. And you are very passionate about your findings. There are 5 pain points that you have pointed out, and many of them I really agree, and I know those are the pain points we live in this segment. And then your policy recommendations to handle those pain points. We will talk about that, and finally we'll open it up for QA, especially
Yeah.
on what we are discussing today. If there are any queries or suggestions, we are happy to hear from our audience. So to start with the context of what we are going to talk about, uh, so what's the problem, right? So that's something many of us are aware of. Is employability a problem, or is it employment a problem? And finally, the verdict is out, and I would like you to take it forward from here.
So, the context here is of course, just one single minute want to express about how skill development contributes to the economic development. If you look at it, so there is a cycle that happens. There is a movement that happens from one's individual skill development to livelihoods to employment, productivity, the quality that one brings in the job that they work, and that ultimately impacts the country's competitiveness. So, skill development is not just a silo. So and India has had the GDP growth rate ever since the independence, the movement from just about 3% pre-licensed Raj to around 8% in 2018, and then stumbling in 2019, and we're in a very bad shape now. But it has provided an opportunity for us to realize the skill shortage, and then therefore have the skill development as one of the thematic areas through which various initiatives were actually brought up. Now, but if you look at the employability scenario, the skills shortages, there are various studies that says that the employers, the corporates are not getting the right skills and competencies for the various kinds of profiles that they have. I'm just quoting one study which says 50% of those who are actually employed are not employable. But there are many such studies which actually, emphasize this particular point. But at the same time, our a population is booming, and we are like second only to China in terms of our population. And if you look at the whole skilling percentage, the percentage of skilling of India in comparison to any of the other developed countries or the comparable economies like Southeast Asian countries or China, for example, we are just about 6% of those who are skilled, while in South Korea it will be something like 96%, and in China, of course, it is like 26%, and UK, Germany, and others like 70 to 80%. So we are definitely lacking in skills. At the same time, employability and the skills mismatch and the skills shortages is a real problem that India is facing now. So that is something we have been trying to address in different ways. So
Yeah, and the percentage varies, Bala, from one study to another. Some of them even say the unemployability is up to 80% or 85% because they just get bodies to be employed at the entry level to start with. And engineering colleges are shutting down. We are seeing lots of impact because of unemployment or unemployability of youth who are graduating from the education system. Also, Bala, we have various terms and concepts that we have been discussing of late. One of them is demographic dividend. In fact, once it was considered a big differentiator, and you had some strong inputs on how it is still relevant for India as a country, even post COVID situation. You want to talk about that?
So India entered this demographic dividend. For the benefit of the viewers, the demographic dividend is nothing but if the percentage of the population of the working age is larger than not the non-working age population. And if you look at China, their demographic dividend ended in 2016, and ours started in 2018, and it goes till 2044, while Japan's actually started in 1964 and ended in 2004. So basically, the percentage is something like 62 percentage we have currently, and we will be moving to something like 70 to 75% in 2025. So that's the way that it is progressing. While China, the Western world, Japan, and others, their working age population is coming down, meaning the dependency ratio becomes higher with the non-working age population. Uh, so, but are we doing right things to capitalize on those demographic asset that we have? We will have the dividend only if we capitalize this economic potential that we have. But as of now, if you look at the labor force workforce participation rate, it is just about 48%, and the remaining 52% is not participating in the workforce, meaning they're not participating in the economic development of the country, which means there is a potential which is still not utilized, and that might be due to various reasons. And one of the key reasons would be the policy measures, the drivers, the incentives attached to it in terms of attracting those workforce to come back, including the economic packages that is released recently. So demographic dividend, yes, it is definitely there in our side, and we can leverage the potential, provided we have the right policies to leverage upon.
In fact, when you talk about workforce participation, one other glaring statistic is declining participation of women in productive employment, especially women who are educated. That's
Yeah,
another,
that's a very
aspect.
strange phenomenon in India. Actually, it's a very strange phenomenon. It is, the reason. I mean, it's the socio-cultural, milieu that the Indian society has, that if because they actually the very way that we are all structured
Yeah.
is that if economic development, we are all studying for only economic development. There is no passion attached to it. So we are
Right.
all studying for something to earn. And if one person earns enough, there is no reason for the other person to earn enough. While that might limit the innovation, the creativity, and the passion attached to it that's coming from the woman, but we still are contented with one person earning it. So that's the reason why
Yeah.
the women participation is so less in India.
True. And there is another viewpoint, Bala, where uh, women are empowered to make their own choice, and if child rearing and looking after the family is a choice, we shouldn't be judging them on that point. However, it's so clear that their potential is not utilized, and it's not a contribution that we can count on. And also, when you look at rural areas, the women participation is another story altogether. In Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the statistics is women participate more, and that's a very different concept and even discussion point altogether. We will have a separate episode on women participation in workforce and the pros and cons, the rights and wrongs, and so on. The other part, Bala, is about the reverse migration. One hears it very often in social media these days, and the plight of migrants who are willing to go back or wanting to go back to their home, but there are no means available in terms of transportation, money, and so on. And many have strong views that once we go, we will not come back. And state governments are trying to retain them. That's also another factor because of COVID-induced new phenomenon, right?
Yeah. So this is a very touchy subject, and I think people have extreme views, as you rightly said. Various WhatsApp groups are actually burning with this particular situation. One thing that we can observe is everyone wants to help, but everyone is helpless at this point of time because of various reasons that are not in our control. But if you look from the skills and workforce development policy, it has a greater significance of what is it going to be for the future. Uh, and those people who are moving from the urban context to the rural context or the semi-urban context, the kind of skill sets and competencies required there is entirely different from what it was in the urban context. And they are not fully prepared for the opportunities that would put. In fact, if you ask any of those who are actually going back, they wouldn't know what exactly the opportunities are there. In the urban context, they could always say that there is this construction, there is this road, there is this building, and there is this facilities management or housekeeping services. I'm talking about those entry level, the migrants who actually move normally. So
Right.
this actually provides a lot of opportunity in terms of creating new frameworks, both in the policies of upskilling them and also to understand what are those potential opportunities, be it self-employment or entrepreneurship opportunities, or even startups,
Yeah.
micro entrepreneurship. All of that could be some. It's not that all of these are not there, but these were
True.
never attractive in the past. But
True.
now, if these people who are going back to their roots wants to live in the place nearer to their home family, I mean, we are all Indian, attached to the family, and there are many opportunities that can come through, and there are organizations working on it, and the policies could actually support in terms of piloting it or scaling it and moving to the, benefiting larger populace who are moving back to
Um,
their rural place.
Absolutely. And as we all know, Indian economy is agrarian, largely informal, largely unorganized. The context of our conversation today is more of organized set of jobs, how we can streamline and use for policy framework and so on. With that, Bala, I think we can quickly jump to how the governance of skill ecosystem is happening in India. Briefly, could you touch upon how the system works?
Yeah, so for the larger benefits, see, one is the skills and workforce development policy, though it is larger in context, we are very specifically talking about the short term finishing school aspect kind of thing, where there are school dropouts or college dropouts who are actually wanting to get into some mainstream employment. So this ministry was formed in 2015 with the Ministry of Skill Development, and even before that, National Skills Development Corporation was formed. There were several ministries at the state and central government which already has set up per se, but basically emulating the same kind of models
Right.
available. So there's close to around 17 to 18 ministries, including, apart from the Ministry of Skill Development that we have. And also there are other initiatives like, say, apprenticeship, which was introduced in 1961 through an act, which has now gone through a whole lot of reforms to also include service sector, which was, and the agri sector as well. Earlier, it used to be only focused on manufacturing, but it is now relaxed. But even then, the uptake is very less.
Right.
So, and the ITIs and the polytechnics and the engineering colleges and other aspect, which is related to the MHRD ministry, where there is a set of skill development which already exists. So this is a larger landscape that we have in India currently.
Right. So we'll quickly move on to the skill development life cycle, Bala, and we will also touch upon what a typical skill life cycle looks like. This is how at the top you have the ministries. Then there are public funded schemes where there is a subsidized money available for a implementation agency, project or program implementation agency, or a training partner or training coordinators, and then they establish training centers in individual states and districts wherever they have numbers allocated. And then there is a QA agency who accredits them, and also there is a sector skill council who awards these uh, systems. So this is the top level structure, as I understand. Bala, from your study, you have come up with a simple framework, and you would like to add in terms of how the system works in the country right now.
Uh, as I mentioned earlier, we are very specifically talking about the short-term skills, where it is targeted at those youth who are looking for employment. So this, since 2003, 2004, there are several schemes that has been that floating around from both central and state government. So what they do normally is they have this scheme which they ask the private players to apply for it through a request for proposal, where they apply and they create training centers, and the whole other structure will also come through this, which will actually talk about how the scheme works in terms of providing the subsidy to the private training provider in terms of upskilling them to get some employment. So that is what the whole framework which is already there. But what I have observed over the period of time in the last 18 years now, observing the skill development, this particular skill development space, both as an implementer and also as an advisor to British government and to the multilateral organizations and managing certain programs now. What has happened is I was able to actually identify some of those pain points that exists in this whole flow of programs that happens, the reason why it is not able to deliver the set objectives. I'm actually saying the aggregated outcome. I'm not actually saying individual stars who are doing exceedingly well.
Right.
Those might be there in different places. I'm talking about the aggregated outcome in terms of what is the target that we set ourselves and what we achieve, what is the job that we wanted to provide and how much have we actually achieved, what is the sustainability of the jobs that each one of them actually get it, and are they able to sustain over a period of time in terms of sustaining
Right.
their livelihoods. So all of those are issues, and those are the ones that I have identified as pain points. And
And
the
Bala,
policies, yeah,
once the
sorry.
training centers are identified, I think they are given some first installment to mobilize youth into the training programs, and then they continue to conduct the training. After finishing it, they award certification, and there is a sector skill council appointed assessment agency who comes and does that certification program. Once the second installment is over, they are progressing towards placement of ensuring their livelihood is there available for these youth. And finally, the sustenance part of it, right? That's where the
Yeah.
employer comes in the picture. So this is the whole
Yeah.
life cycle as
Yeah.
we understand. This is again for those benefit of those who are uh, pretty new to this segment, and this is where I think your research come handy in terms of using your past experience on either side of the table, creating programs and implementing them, and also running the program on the ground. You have identified few pain points. So I just want to jump into that area right now. So let's talk about the pain points. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there are, I think, 5 to 6 different pain points. The first one is the principal agent issue, which is there across all the public procurement programs. So if the public sector feels that they have the public money and they are the custodian of the public money, and they are actually giving that public money as subsidy to actually achieve certain outcomes. And the set of players who can actually deliver these outcomes are private players, be it NGOs or the for-profit private enterprises. Now, the private sector actually feels that there is a lot of monitoring and tussling them and forcing them to adhere to certain guidelines, which is not actually helping them deliver the quality outcomes they would do it. At the same time, the public sector would say that no, you are actually misusing the funds of the public, and therefore you will have to strengthen your systems properly. And also there is a different kind of manipulation that happens on both sides in terms of people, I mean, seeking rent from the public sector, or the private sector actually misusing the funds for not for the real cause intended. This has always been there, and it's not just in skills development, across all other publicly procured goods or services. This is one pain point, but I've specifically understood what could be the potential solution that we will actually come a bit later. So the second one is in terms of the mobilization issues. In the beginning, while we were setting the context, we were talking about how there's huge opportunity from the private sector of the various kinds of jobs available. But at the same time, there is this demographic dividend, and people are looking for jobs. Unemployment is there, unemployability is an issue. But still, if you go and ask any of these training providers, they will say one of the biggest challenge that they have is to actually mobilize the youth. And it also has a context. Something, if you look at 2002, 2004, those days, we have not faced this issue then.
No.
Because at that point of time, that school dropout ratio there is quite high. But because of various policy initiatives that was taken on the education side, like the right to education, which is till to the age of 14 or the 8th standard, the dropout ratio has significantly come down. And also for
Yeah.
other measures, not just the right to education, but also for other, acknowledgements of the importance of education. It has come down, and therefore the population has shrinked, which is like 30% is the dropout now. But still, people are not able to get the right candidate for the training that they wanted. So that is another pain point that we all know.
This is a NEET population we are talking about, right? Not in education, employment, or training.
Yes, 30%
Also,
of India's youth population is in NEET only. Yes.
and also it baffles me, Bala. One uh, question I normally ask in larger forums is, do you know how many people are celebrating their 18th birthday at any given point in time in India? So I get different kind of answers. Then I tell them every month nearly 1 to 1.5 million youth are turning 18. That means in a year, 12 to 15 million youth are turning 18. So they all would be looking for employment. Uh, Having said that, still mobilization is a challenge. Getting
Yes.
them into classroom is a challenge. You're right.
Yeah, one is the age that you're talking about from the demographic side, but also if you look at the labor workforce coming every year into the workforce is also the same number. I think it will corroborate with each other. So the other one is the quality issue in terms of what the industry needs uh, and what is actually given as inputs for their training and how it is quality assured by the accreditation agencies, the inputs that is required to deliver the training. So that is issue that is always there, and that is one pain point. The other one is the no premium for certificates. Though while these people actually come out through this training, but still the employer or the corporate or any other person doesn't look as someone who's skilled through a certification, and therefore I should take it. And there is no premium for the certification that they hold. That is a big problem. While there's a lot of initiative that has actually happened, but still it remains the problem. There is also, while the assessment is happening in the training center, there is possible rent seeking that people are saying. That is also the reason. The reason is multifold there. We will get into the details later, but there is a possible handshake that happens, or the correlation between the delivery of the training and the assessment outcome, or the qualification of the trainer and the assessment. So there is a whole lot of analytics which actually says that this could be improved much better than what it is today. So that is one. So sorry, there are some few things which is not visible. So low placement percentage, which is another big problem that we have, the demand supply gap that eternally it has been seen. The very fact that it was this whole concept was created only for the demand and not for the supply, but the whole program is now becoming a supply driven program for some reason across states and country. That is the biggest pain point that one need to address.
Migration issues, the next one.
Yeah, migration is another big issue, because as we were discussing about the opportunities are all there in the western and southern states of India, while the low income states of India doesn't have all that industrialization and formal jobs, and they are actually moving to all these places. Also about rural and urban migration that happens, and now in this current context, no
Yeah.
need to explain uh, the exodus that is happening across the globe. Of course, across the globe, but across India, especially those who are low skilled. That is the point here. There is
True.
also Indians coming from, say, West Asia, so they are all the middle skilled, those types. There are also people thinking of coming back from, say, US, UK, and other developed countries for various reasons. And if you know US, the unemployment filing has increased by 36 million today. So there is a possibility. But those are high skilled ones. So even if they come and adapt to Indian
Yeah.
context of wherever they want to, there are certain policy recommendations, policy implementation that is required to actually accommodate everyone.
Yeah.
Though it may not result in having a job for everyone, but at least a skill which could make them engage economically.
And some kind of adjustment would happen. A new normal would come forward with all these flux happening around us. And the last pain
Yeah.
point, Bala, is also very interesting for me when we discussed. It's about employer not being involved, and there is no incentive for the employer.
So that's
Right?
the strangest of the thing. But anyone would looking at it, the first logical question would be asking is, okay, you are skilling someone for employment in some private organization. Are they
Yeah.
involved in this? But unfortunately, the structure that we have now, of course, it all started from the employer only. If you remember those days, there are academies formed only if there is a demand. There is
Yeah.
this there is this Voltas who came and said, I need AC electrician, and we would say, okay, you are not the only one in this sector. There are hundreds of others, but since you are the leader, we will actually start this academy for the sector
Yeah.
and then estimate the demand ultimately. So the academy is set up for that reason. But what
True.
is now happening is, I mean, of course, that this whole policy that has shaped over the years is also towards that only, but lost in translation now. As
Yeah.
of now, it's not getting there at all. Employer
Yeah.
is someone who just sits back, relaxes, and says, "I want this one," and the training provider trains someone and gives to them. And
Yeah.
and since there is no incentive for certification, he would either
Correct.
look for the training partner once, otherwise he will say, "I will actually get it from on the ground through some other means who
Absolutely.
is unskilled." Yeah,
I
so
was
that is
just
the way
reflecting on
it
my
works.
Yeah, Rabal, I was reflecting on my experience of working in Singapore when I was with IT major. There I saw that they even predict how many jobs would be required for a beauty industry 3 years from now. And they tell certification agencies only to have intake for meeting that demand. And they also go ahead and talk about migration, of foreign nationals to say we have these many professional positions are available. If you are interested to migrate, these skilled workers are welcome. Same thing happens in Canada, same thing happens in Australia. If you are emigrating to a different country, if you have looked into those eligibility criteria, they'll say these are the professionals we need. So to that level,
So
employer is involved, right?
yeah, so that is the difference in terms of having those data, the repository
Yeah.
of who are those who are skilled, at what level are they in, and then the economic impetus stimulus that is given is directed towards that, to
Yes.
actually have this local economic advancement and the larger macroeconomic advancement. That's the way it has to be decided, but somehow it has not taken that direction. And also, you are talking about that skill gap studies that normally happens. Nowadays, through artificial intelligence and the automation process, in the click of a button, you can say what are those sectors which are in demand and will be in demand for the next 3 months. It's not anymore that one has to do like 2 3 months of study to understand what that skill gap is.
Yeah.
And also, the future of jobs is another big challenge that everyone has because of
True.
this automation and artificial intelligence, how it is going to impact their life. But it is also simplifying our lives in terms of understanding what those demand is going to be in a click of a button.
True.
So just that we
Yeah.
need to adopt it. Yeah.
I think we have deliberated quite well in terms of the pain points that we are experiencing. I'll quickly jump to the 5 point recommendation that you have proposed for overcoming these pain points. Yeah, so we will look at each of these. Bala, you would like to talk about the first one, Youth Guarantee Program.
Yeah, it was quite a fascinating idea. So in India, if you look at it, we have this Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Program, which is actually targeted for 18 to 60 years of old. I mean, anyone could do it. But if you actually look at the uptake of people, it's only between the age group of, say, 35, 40 years to 60, not the youth population who actually participates. But it has had tremendous impact in the rural sector. I'm talking about MG and Rega. Coming to
Right.
this youth guarantee, the way that they have structured is such that any youth who goes to the local county, or in our parlance, the district authority, and registers there and says that they are not either economically or educationally engaged. So that particular municipality or the district functionary need to give an assurance within 4 months of engagement, either in traineeship, that you can actually get trained in certain skills based on your aspirations or demand in the market, or you can get engaged in an apprenticeship based on the available opportunity that poses, or it could be a recognition of your previous skills that you have, or it could be a continued education for you for that matter. So any of these could be part of it. uh, Now, since the implementation that it started in 2012, the unemployment rate has actually significantly come down from 24% to just 14% in Europe. And also the NEET population, the 13.2% at the time of the launch, has come down to 10.3%. Now, the question that many of us would have is, like European Union, it's a well-structured organization, country context. Everything is very much organized, and therefore implementing such a program is not a big deal. But
Yeah.
implementing in India will be a real rigmarole.
Size matters.
Yeah, and task and some of the figures that I've mentioned here must be the figure of a state, not more than that in comparison, because given the size of the population that we have. But I mean, how I felt that this is going to be relevant and more relevant in the current context is that if you look at any migrant now, moving from say one district to the other, he is now recorded. Who is moving from one district to the other is now recorded. Who is coming from one state to the other is now recorded. There is a macro data that that is available in terms of who's the number of migrants within the country and outside the country, but never into the
True.
details of it. But now we
True.
are getting into it. Now
Technology
think
is
of
also enabling that, right, Bala?
enabling us. Yeah, technology is very much enabling. So if you are able to actually have that repository, then we will be able to service those youth much better. The second one
Right.
was I was talking about this public financing models. What are the various public financing tools that is available now? Skill voucher scheme, which is basically, I mean, these are all interconnected. I mean, youth guarantee is the first larger part, and what are the various tools that one can use. Now, the skill voucher scheme is something that would increase the competitiveness of the training provider, and also it increases the choice of the aspirant who wanted to get trained. It is not new in India. There is a failed program in the past. But what I'm suggesting here is very much focused on certain target groups. It is targeted. So either you target certain vulnerable groups. For example, if taxi drivers are the ones who are actually getting impacted in this whole thing, can we have certain upskilling program towards that, and where they can access this and get that skilling required? For example, if you need to have this social distancing measures, what are the very short duration of that for the drivers, or for that matter, the domestic workers, how it has to now change. That could be done through the skill voucher thing. The targeted tender, the one that I was trying to mention, is that now it's a one size fit all approach that either the state or the center actually says, I have so much of budget, I wanted to train 1 crore people, and you employ them. So that's what the thing is, but that has not yielded result. So what I'm trying to say here is, in many of the countries, we'll come to the examples later. Many of the countries within the Europe have done very targeted tendering for, say, migrant workers, or to those who have just lost their job,
Yeah.
or those who are
Person with
unskilled.
disability.
Yeah,
Person with
person with disability,
disabilities.
different. Yeah. So, and therefore, the kind of people who apply will also be very much focused on that. Of course, it increases the administrative cost from the public sector side of things. But if we adopt these policies and tools, we will be able to actually achieve the outcomes much faster and more effectively. The
Yeah.
social impact bonds is another interesting concept, and it is now finding its feet in India, but still not done much of it. Where you don't, where the public sector doesn't have to spend ex ante. It could be something that the private sector foundation or an investor could invest first, agreeing what are those metrics that they will actually achieve as an outcome of that particular project. And once if they actually achieve that outcome, the public sector or the one philanthropic organization, whichever is supporting this, could support it.
Yeah.
Not just support it, sorry, they could actually reimburse it, or reimburse with additional interest rate.
In fact,
So
Bala, this
it's
one initiative or one policy level push can create
mm,
wonders in fixing many of the pain points we discussed earlier. This
Yeah.
is dubbed as pay for outcomes. Typically now the scheme is paying for input. Do you have a camera, do you have this, you have a certified trainer. So all of these are more of input measures rather than focusing only on the outcome. And even when we look at the outcome parameters, only 30% or less get placement. That means if I pay for 100 participants or 100 candidates, I get the impact of 30. That means if I pay the quantum of say 1 crore for 100 people, it's divided by only 30. So per beneficiary cost goes up. So this is a hidden cost in the entire system. Having a social impact bond, I think we can address many of the pain points, and especially targeted social impact bond. It has shown a lot of proven models in education sector where a scorecard is
Yeah.
drawn out, girls enrollment to go up, and many other parameters which are outcome based,
Yeah.
where a risk investor comes in like any other investment, like a stock market or a mutual fund or anywhere. They invest in skill development. That means we are expanding the sources of funds, not restricting to philanthropic
Just the public sector. Yeah. Yeah.
or the public sector or CSR funds of corporates. We are expanding it to have new sources of funding coming into the sector. Absolutely
So
right,
in
Bala.
yeah, European Union, there is a social innovation fund that they had, and in Portugal that they did a pilot very specifically only for those IT sector employees who had lost a job because they have not upskilled, and there is a foundation which actually did it successfully. After a year, they actually got the money back, and they all moved up to the next level. So there are models available, and in India, we could actually target very specifically, given the context that we are in, and achieve greater outcomes. The fourth one is basically again a part of how we can expand the public money through a cess mechanism, basically the targeted hypothecated tax that you can get only for skill development. Nowadays, you actually see a whole lot of reforms happening at the MSME sector, agri sector, labor sector. One of the things that could happen also through the cess tax that could happen, but it may not be as relevant as other recommendations that we just discussed at this context because nobody has the money to pay the tax, first of all. So this is the quality assurance framework. It might get boring to few, so I will actually cut through very short. Basically, what Bhaskar was saying is what is included here, which is uh, not just the input metrics, have the outcome metrics as part of it, and also certain recommendations like the student rating. As of now, the student rating is not part of the rating. Again, this is an outcome, but we should actually move as per the trend, like the Amazons or the others who actually rate it and make sure that the quality improves over a period of time. The same way, the skilling sector should also move up to that level. And the penalty guidelines in the European Union and the Australian setup is so
Mm.
strong that if anyone actually uh, have done any innuendo mistake or
Mm.
wrong reporting, their license is cancelled forever, no
Wow.
questions asked. But here we actually go through a whole lot of appeal process and evidence gathering. I am handling that personally, so I know the pain it has.
So
But there
sometimes,
are also several.
some yeah,
Sorry.
sometimes Bala, democracy is felt as democracy.
So true. Yeah, and also the fourth recommendation is in terms of partner, compare, and promote. I was actually mentioning here European qualification framework with Indian national skills qualification framework, and therefore it will increase the transnational mobility. As of now, even though for those who are doctors and nurses, if they are going to UK, there are many of my friends who go there, even the pharmacists, for example, our friends who go there and they actually write a different exam, and it is
Yeah.
not so. But if there is this compare and partner kind of a thing, where we have standards up to that level of competitiveness that they're expecting, then all these mobility issues becomes easier. uh,
Yeah.
and also
In fact,
the
that's
awarding.
that's one of the dreams of India, right? Having a transnational skills framework. Recently, we had a exchange with Japan as a country, and there
Yeah,
are talks about having exchange with Australia and European countries. I think that's going to be one other benefit of these radical, uh, reforms that you're talking about, where India can truly cash in on the demographic dividend.
in fact, we were at the cusp of actually doing many such transnational thing before the COVID struck us. So that is
Uh,
the way
Now we will be
it has to
looking
be looked at.
inward, go local, right?
Yeah.
Be vocal for
So
local. Hyper local focus should be the primary focus, I
no,
think, because of
otherwise we have been talking about India being the skill capital of the world, because
yes,
even the World Bank study, which actually says that by 2025 there will be a skill shortage of 56 million people all over the world, while India will have a surplus of around 50 million people who are skilled but still not able to find jobs by
right.
2025. And these are the people who will be actually serving those set of opportunities across. And that is what the context just before January 2020. But now things have evolved and changed, and we are actually looking at a whole different world now. Hopefully, everything comes back to normal for us to realize all those dreams that we had. And the fifth one, where are we now? The fifth one, right? Okay. So, this is a policy recommendation for promoting industry engagement. As I was mentioning in the beginning, where the industry or the employers are not uh, uh, playing a key stakeholder in terms of deciding what sector, what job role, how it has to be trained and everything. Of course, there are sector skill councils which are available. There are 38 of that which is already formed. What I'm proposing here, which I saw some quite interesting stuff in European Union, is having employer councils. It's
Mm.
not just the sector skill council. Have the employer council and incentivize them to adopt the national skills qualification framework.
Yeah,
And
and
now in India,
I think Bala, the key which I took from this policy recommendation is a regional employer council, which is a unique concept. Do you want to talk about that?
yeah. So for the size of India, uh, we need to have regional employers. In fact, for the size of Greece, they have it. And
Oh,
the kind of population that they have regional employer councils. They actually have regional meetings, and it is actually organized by organizations like Cedefop and ETF, who actually organize these workshops and facilitate and understand what exactly are the skill sets that is required. In India, what I'm proposing here is, okay, there is sector skill council, you have regional employer council, in terms of having them as a sounding board of the
mm,
various qualification frameworks that the sector skill councils actually produces. Of course, there is a process that sector skill councils follows, which also involves the employer, but it is one-off engagement. What I'm saying
yeah.
is a structural engagement that need to happen
So
to
two things I
constantly
take
flow.
away. Yeah, two
Yeah,
things I take away, Bala. One is the formality of it, where employers have a position and a role and a say and a voice. Second is a dynamism. It's not one-time effort. It's more a very regular, interaction where structural changes can be made at a
yeah,
regional level when we involve them. Yeah.
yeah. So that is the one that I was saying. The other one is even the corporates. If you look at it, every corporate have pre-employment training and also internal training that happens. For example, even if there is a promotion or even for any other learning engagement of the employees, they have many such training programs organized. But none of this are the national skills qualification framework aligned. Now, one could argue, why do you want to actually standardize every other single thing that is coming out from the corporates?
Right.
But if you look from the lens of larger country economic, output and productivity, and the skill stock that we have in various levels of the job roles. That could be something that the the government could incentivize. If any person who comes into the private sector, and if he goes through a certain set of training, and if it is NSQF aligned, or if they are procuring from an accredited training provider, that uh, that subsidy they are otherwise giving for those unemployed youth could also be given. So there is a concerted effort that
Yeah.
actually consolidates all of this skill stock together at various levels, which helps as a country to promote and market. That's what I
True.
was trying to say, and also to promote the national skills qualification framework. I was talking about how there are no premium for certification. Now, there are many countries UKs, especially if they don't have the UK qualification framework accredited by the sector skill councils, their certifications are not valid.
Hmm.
Period. No employment happens. Even in informal sector, they need to have that qualification framework assessed and certified. But that's not the case in India. But of course, their qualification framework started in 1960s and ours started only in 2000. So we could wait that to happen, or we could make certain policy changes that would make the adoption quicker. For example,
Yeah.
if we say that any procurement that happens from the public sector need to have certain percentage, which is already there, but still we have not caught up to the percentage
Adoption is the
target that we
issue.
have set. Adoption is the issue.
Adoption and accountability, structure is the issue. Who is
And the
monitoring? Yeah.
incentivizing of it.
True.
So that is what it is. Financial, I was actually quoting few things, which is grants involving a transfer of money or in-kind support to the state to the companies. Basically, it
Right.
is correlating with the the second point that I mentioned in the same slide, where
Right.
if the organization is matching up to the standards of the skilling, the government can actually reimburse. It can happen in many forms. I'll not go into each of this. It could be like the corporate tax. For
Yeah.
example, if the corporate is actually filing a tax, and if they have trained people, it's just like how in for GST, goods and services tax, you have a
Yeah.
system through which you are able to actually file it and get the returns, or you onward return to them.
See.
Just like
Yeah.
that, it could be as simple as, and there are countries which actually does this,
In fact,
where they
Bala,
can file.
sorry, in Indian context, I think the micro, medium, and small enterprise would benefit a lot by this kind of policy, where their entire training budget will be reimbursed by the government.
Yes, yes,
That's a fantastic proposition, and in fact, it will
the,
also boost their profitability. And it is in their interest that they need to recognize the certification. And also,
exactly.
I see that you are talking about create public recognition by having award ceremonies and glorify skilling. I think that's the direction to go. Absolutely. I'm just moving on to the next recommendation, Bala.
Hmm.
The last one, tools for
Yeah.
international.
So this is something would help in benchmarking. So as of now, what is happening is there's a lot of initiative that is coming from the government of India and also from the state governments, various skill development programs, but none of this is benchmarked. Uh,
Yeah.
so there are many tools available internationally, and that is followed by all the developed countries. And since India is now moving from low-income country to the middle-income country, we should actually adopt it. I don't know where it is stuck. So the first one I was actually talking about this is the World Bank's systemic systems approach for better results, SABER, and for which they have a very specific workforce development benchmarking system,
Hmm.
where they actually classify through an indicator of the country's status. Either they are latent, emerging, excellent. I mean, there are four, benchmarking that they have. But India is not participating in it. But I did a fair analysis of where we are with the experience and understanding that I have. But I could say that we are just about the latent to just moving to the next one type. Unless and until we compare ourselves to at least a similar economy, we will not be able to grow and compete. So that is something that India should look at. The same is the next one, which is the OECD indicator for skill development, which is also something that India is not participating, which we should do that. And European Commission framework for effective adult learning policies is we don't have an adult learning policy here. We do have skill development policy. There is an education policy, but there is a larger adult learning policies in terms of promoting youth's aspiration and the way it has to be customized to the youth. So it's a very profound topic per se, the lifelong learning and other aspects related to that. But that again is something that we have not taken much
Yeah,
strides. So
true.
that is something we could do there as well. And also the interoperable qualification framework is something we spoke already. And the other
Yes.
one that I'm talking about is the partner participate in the quality assurance framework uh, to improve our quality measures and benchmarking. So basically, this whole slide is about international benchmarking and understanding what our status quo is and how we can move up the value chain.
So putting together all of these, Bala, these five policy recommendations, having a youth guarantee program, create some innovative public financing instruments, have a good quality assurance framework and drive it to ensure all the partners are held accountable for their end of delivery of quality. Enhance industry engagement by having regional employer councils and incentivize them through financial and non-financial support, and finally have a benchmark mechanism to peg our quality to those of the developed countries. So with these five policy recommendations, I think we are addressing all of these pain points together.
Yeah. So that is what I was trying to do through this.
Very well thought to throw, Bala. Excellent. I think
So
your years of experience and exposure to various markets, developed markets, how they behave, it has given a very astute study of the system, and really appreciate you putting this together for us.
thank you. I think each owner has a certain set of measures to be taken. It's not something that I'm sitting on a pedestal and saying this is what will work. I'm only saying that through the experience and the context understanding, these are possible areas of recommendations that could work. Now, the only way to proceed and move the excellence is to actually try it out and pilot and see how it works. And that is something that we should do collectively as an
Absolutely, Bala.
organization.
Absolutely. And I'm really surprised and happy to note that Madhuri is also part of our audience. She
Oh,
runs this
wow.
national skill network. Absolutely
Hi, Madhu.
amazing work that you're doing, Madhuri, in combining all of these perspectives and being a voice for the industry. So thank you so much for joining us. And Bala, it's been a pleasure listening to you. Various countries' perspective, things which worked, which didn't work. You have done a thorough analysis of all of these. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I would like to take opportunity to highlight few questions, Bala, which came from the audience. Is that okay with you? Maybe take about
Yeah,
few minutes. Yeah.
yeah,
So there is a question from Ashok Kumar,
yeah,
uh,
uh,
which
yeah.
talks about in the current scenario where some services face significant change or even annihilation. Do you see need to address the new gap, especially those now left with no livelihood, young or old?
Yeah, this is the context that we are living in. And very few organizations are actually proactively looking at those opportunities. That is quite unfortunate. Even in the training ecosystem, if you look at it, uh, few organizations had gone to the level of understanding, going to the rural area, talking to the people, or the semi-urban areas, understanding what their skill sets is, and also contextualizing to the need of that particular local economy. And also, there is a study that now we are engaging with Satwa and JP Morgan. It's still not, it's a very initial stage of discussion that we're having. basically to understand what are those sectors and job roles which would emerge in the new normal, uh,
Right.
and how we could stitch. There are two things there is one, you have an existing skill set, and there is an opportunity how you can match is one
Right.
set of thought. The other one is, of course, the skill set that you have no relevance to the opportunity that exists in your market, and therefore how you can reskill. So this is something that is emerging. I think more players should join hands to find solutions for this.
Absolutely. And there's one more question from Shiladitya Samadar. He says, absolutely right. Premium on certificates is one point he agrees with. There is no premium. And he is also asking, is there any equivalence of certificate NSDC versus ITI from an employer side? And would the certificate premium be partially mitigated by equivalence?
See, we have NCVT. So I don't want to get into that real, because I'm actually coming from the policy perspective, not representing NSDC. But since the question is coming now, there is NCVT, there is SSC, and now there is a proposal to add more awarding bodies.
Hmm.
Because so earlier there was a thought, okay, only SSCs are there, that certification should be good enough. But now they are saying that you need to increase the number of awarding bodies to increase the quality of it, because the
Right.
competitiveness will drive the quality, and it will be the choice of the trainee or the training provider in terms of choosing the awarding. So as of now, it is moving towards the direction that we would have more sets. Of course, there is an equivalence that you can benchmark through the levels, NSQF levels. All of that will be mapped through NSQF. So if a level 4 certification is coming from SSC and the
Hmm.
level 4 is coming from NCVT, it should be the same. It is not currently, but that is what the road that is being taken.
True. And we also have one participant, Divya. Uh, I think she's kind of provoked by our conversation on women participation in workforce. And I could see the comments where she says, yes, it's a concern. It's very low. However, how do we account for the time women spent in household activities, taking care of children to make them capable of performing economic activities? And how do we pay account for the unpaid household work done for now? And we can consider it as an indirect impact on economy. Any thoughts around it?
Divya, great question. Actually, if you look at it, even in the labor force workforce participation, the sad part is the domestic work is not considered as economic activity. Uh,
Yeah.
but that is the first reform that need to happen, because it is an economic. If that is not happening, the other side of the economy would not function. If that is what the actual scenario is, I don't know why they are leaving it. And this whole debate about women participation is coming from the Western context. There is certain merit to it, but as Bhaskar, you were mentioning in the beginning, it's about the informed choice option. It's about whether I wanted to take it up, or if I want to stay back and still contribute to the economic development. Both has economic output, but that is not accounted in the labor force market participation, which is a sad thing. And at least the economists should look at that. I think now we are all evolving, and it will be added over a period of time, is what we could assume.
And also, Bala, adding on to that, there is another big area that no one is talking about, or at least I don't see many debate happening, is underemployment. Right? I joined my family business. I could have joined a corporate or organized job, or I have set up my own shop and given job for a few more people. But I choose to join my family business and work in that shop. So obviously, I save on rent. The salary that I give. There is a job loss of a person, and my market worth is not realized by working in that setup, which is underemployment. This is another aspect that I think uh, is less talked about, and there are a lot of reforms that need to come in this area as well.
Uh, True. So there is a skill voucher program in France, especially focused on not the underemployed, but those who wanted to move from the current employment to the next level, and how they could upskill. So they are saying upskilling programs
Right.
through which it could happen. Uh, in India, we don't have any such initiatives, but we should find a way to address this issue.
Last two questions, Bala. There are a lot of questions coming in. I just want to take up the last one, second last one. It's from Vikramjeet. What are your thoughts on shift in skill sets required in the new normal, especially for informal sector?
I think Vikram, thanks for asking this question. This is this whole puzzle that we are all trying to address. As I was mentioning, there are very few organizations which is actually exploring this idea, understanding what the exact requirements are. But what I believe is that we should also use the technology to the advantage in terms of assessing what those skill sets is going to be. Uh, so it's all evolving at this point of time, and we need to join hands with those people who are actually on the grassroots. Actually, had the grassroots organization been partnered during the lockdown decision, a lot of these migration issues would have not happened. The
Yeah,
same way, if we are partnering with those grassroots organizations which are exploring what those skill sets and sectors which is going to have relevance, uh, then there is a possibility of addressing this issue quite quickly.
true. And with that, the last question, Bala, I think this is also more of a crystal ball gazing. When I read the question, I could see a provocative thought. I'll just put it up on the screen. Do you see reverse migration as catalyst to micro urbanization of Indian towns or villages? If yes, in 10 years, do you foresee cities getting decongested?
That's a dream that I mean. So the crystal gazing, I think it's quite interesting, but because there are also all these 1 minute videos and other things of extrapolating what our normal would be in the next 1 or 2 years. They're saying that, I mean, you could work anywhere, and so why at all should you migrate? But that's not the
Yeah,
luxury that those who are low skilled could have. That luxury is something that we could have, but they have to find urbanization is the only way out. But uh, the smart villages, if it is carried out, it doesn't have to be the same model as how urban congestion happened. It could be a great village, but still be smart enough to provide all the opportunities that they would need. So Shailaditya, I'm also eagerly looking forward to that normal. Of course, we all can extrapolate and crystal gaze what is in store, but we are all in the same boat, I think.
and the biodiversity day coming in, World Environment Day, with the theme of biodiversity. I think this is an apt daydreaming we can do, and in fact it should come become a reality. Even in COVID lockdown period, one could see the news item where in Tirupati a lot of tigers and spotted leopards and peacocks came out in open. Same thing happened in Hyderabad, Bangalore, and many other urban places where nature took over, where we could not compensate, and pollution levels dropped, congestion in traffic dropped. I think many of these would become a reality in future. And as you said, Bala,
Yes.
not a privilege everyone enjoys. There is a digital divide. Some of us who have the access could work from home, and all of us are aware of TCS 25 by 25. Boldly, they led the entire IT industry, ITES industry forward by saying only 25% of their workforce will come to office by the year 2025. That means 75% of workforce will continue to work from home. Amazon, Twitter, Google, many of them have given notification that employees can work permanently from
So
home. So,
that's some of the positives for the privileged, but as I told you,
yeah,
that is not there for everyone. And if not for the livelihood issue,
yeah,
people all would love to have this situation continue forever.
true,
Because since India is 93% of those are who are in the informal sector, and their lives are at stake. And of course, if they are not there, our economy is not going to function. That's
true.
also the truth. But for the at least the interim short term, we all feel those who are privileged. This is a good situation we are in, where the pollution has come down, where we are giving space for the animals and of course for virus as well. uh, but the livelihoods is a big question, and the support system that we have through the livelihoods is what should be a concern for all of us, for which I think we are talking about all that different initiatives or the policy recommendations that we are talking could help overcome that difficulty.
True. And with one quote from a favorite leader of mine, we could bring this conversation to a conclusion, Bala. We were having a webinar with Mr. Ramadurai, some of the leaders of Tata Stripe. We were in a conversation where he mentioned one thing which stuck with me. He says, "Gone are the days where people have to move for jobs. Now jobs have to move to people."
Yeah.
Right? I found it very profound, and that's going to be the reality. Whether the reverse migration or not, I think jobs will have to move to where people are, and newer methods and productive ways of handling the local jobs will have to make way. I think with that, all these 5 policy recommendations that you are making, Bala, from your study, extensive research, and you have spoken to so many people in your journey. I think that's a fantastic opportunity for us to learn from your collective wisdom. And you have done Skype calls and interviews with all the who's who of this sector, and you have studied various publications. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and in a concised manner, so that people who are having expertise in this area, also the beginners in that wide range of spectrum, we all could understand how these policy levers could bring about a mass shift in the system. And really appreciate your generous sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bhaskar, and thank you for everyone who is watching. I only hope that whatever these recommendations could have certain positive outcomes and implications. And thank you very much, Bhaskar, for nudging me to share this, which I would have not done to the extent that I should, because no policy comes to the fore if not advocated well. And of course, I've advocated with the modesty attached to it, which is. But at this point of time, with especially the COVID times, I think it will have a lots of relevance, which session like this encourages me to push further to make these things happen. Thank you very much for hosting.
You're welcome, Bala. We need fresh ideas, fresh push to move into a new normal. Thank you, everyone, for watching this show. Please consider subscribing for future episodes. Really appreciate you staying with us till the end. Thank you. Wish you all
Thank
the
you.
best
Thank
and
you all.
stay safe.
Thank you all.
Bye bye.
Bye. See you.